Hello everybody, welcome to this last video of the agroecology lecture. The idea today is to see what can we do with all that we've seen these last weeks. So the idea is what can we do if we combine all these agroecological practices that we talked about, what type of farm, what type of like perfect agroecological system could we try to create. So this is why today I will talk about what we do at the agroecology unit of the Antenna Foundation. So I will. So this is why the presentation today is about agroecological model farm for different geoclimatic zones of sub-Saharan Africa. Is it a way to autonomously and sustainably produce on small areas and allow food security? So as I said today, I will show more in details what we do at the Antenna Foundation in the agroecology unit and give an example of one of our agroecological model farm. So as a reminder, I said a few words about Antenna at the beginning of the lecture, but Antenna is a foundation committed to scientific research and dissemination of technological, economical and medical solutions for the most vulnerable in the world. Antenna is active since 30 years and has worked in more than 20 countries in 60 projects, and is active in the field of wash, water and hygiene, energy, agroecology, nutrition, microcredit, medicine and schools. What is the idea at the Antenna Foundation? Depending on the topic we are working, we still follow the same path, which is to research and develop a solution. It can be a product, it can be a concept. Then test this product or concept, test this solution on the ground in the countries, in the target countries, and then in a third part, diffuse this solution as widely as possible. So now a few words about the agroecology unit, which is the youngest of the units of the foundation. So what we do at the agroecology unit is try to develop a solution which is a productive and sustainable agroecosystem. So to do this, we will try to replicate the stability of a natural ecosystem by using food crops and productive animals. So we will use positive interaction between crop, positive interaction with predatory and pollinating species, negative interaction towards weeds and pests, resilience of the system using mostly biodiversity, and management of resources, nutrients and water in a closed circuit. Then what is an agroecosystemic model, which is this solution that we try to develop at Antenna? It is basically a design, a plan of a farm. It is a plan of a farm that can produce intensively and sustainably on a small area all commodities needed for subsistence. So the farm will produce vegetables, cereals, fruits, animals, and cash crops. The farm is an agroecological farm. It's an organic farm. It will produce without the use of synthetic and external pesticides and fertilizers. So we will use the animal mostly to create the necessary manure for the farm. And as I said, these are small farms on small areas. So we try to create these farms, these models for the average area of small-scale farmer in the region where we are active. So more widely, the strategy is to develop this agroecosystemic model, so this plan of the farms for different geoclimatic regions of Africa. So we will create a model, a farm plan according to the climate, according to the Köppen classification of climate, we will go more precisely in different climates by making models for different length of the rainy season, which can vary a lot inside the Köppen climate zone. We will then adapt to the main type of soils that we find in the region. And of course, we will adapt to the commodities that are usually produced by farmers and that are usually eaten by the people in the region. We create this model in collaboration, of course, with the local partner, where we will work and implement the model farm, the testing farm. And we will try to combine traditional practice of target country, of other countries as well where we are active, and combining them with research from scientific results from scientific research of agronomy and more specifically of agroecology. So then the idea is to test and promote this model. So first of all, we want to test the farm, the model as it is, and this is why we will establish what we call a model farm at family village scale. So it is a farm that will be created exactly according to the model in order to be able to test the model, to test if it's efficient, is it productive. And for this reason, we will look at the yields of the different crop in the farm and monitor the attack of pest and disease. We will also try to see if this farm is sustainable in an economic point of view. So we will look at the farm. Is it able to sustain itself? Is it able to generate revenues to pay back the investment needed to create it? And we will look at the sustainability of the farm. So is it really in a closed cycle? Do we have a better biodiversity than in other farms in the region, and so on? With all this result, we will be able to adapt and perfect the model, and then when it's done, we can publish it and share it at a larger scale. So this farm that we built, this model farm, is first of all a research and development site, but it's still also a production site because it is a farm that is here and that should stay after the project. So it's a farm that should be able to sustain itself, to produce in order to pay its charges. And finally, it's also a training site because we will use this site to promote the agroecological practices that we show, that we test on the farm, and also to promote the concept of this agroecological farm. So in our project, we have this first phase, which is establishing this model farm as a production, training, and research site. And then we have a second phase that we establish in the different countries, is to establish a network of what we call sister farm. So the idea is we want to test how we tested the concept theoretically of establishing one model farm, but we mostly want to know what can farmers do about of this. Can the farmers adapt their farms to create something similar to the model farm, and to this way is our concept replicable for farmers of the region. So this is why we will train farmers on the main site, and then we will help them to adapt their farms and create a so-called sister farm. By doing so, we will also disseminate the agroecological practice to the farmers. Each of these sister farms will, as the mother farm, be a site of production, because they are farmers that use these farms for themselves, for the income generation and production of food. They are also sites of training. The idea is to have a chain training that these farmers of the sister farms can train and disseminate the agroecological practice to the neighbor. And it is a site of research because we will collect data on these sister farms as well. And we will use this data of the sister farm to adapt the model and add some aspects that come from the farmers themselves. So basically in the project, we train 50 to 100 farmers each year on the mother farm. And then after the training, this farmer propose a concept of how to set up a sister farm at their home. And usually we will help 10 of them each year to establish a farm. So they will create this farm with their own means, but we will help them to make the concept. We will help them technically, and we will give some seed money in the project so that they can create their projects. So basically, all of this is to test and create a final model of a farm, and then as I said in the antenna strategy, we want to disseminate this model as much as possible. So first of all, we disseminate the model and the agroecological practices that are part of it at a local level around the project in the project areas. This is firstly through the training session that we do on the mother farm, but it's also through the sister farms that we have a dissemination, and to the collaboration with government or bigger organization whom we can share the results if they want to do a similar project of dissemination. And then we want to share these results and these agroecological models on a bigger scale. So we will publish the results in scientific papers, of course, and we will establish an online library where you can find um, the agroecological models for the regions you want to work with, so that maybe some NGOs or government can use this data to strengthen agroecology and food security in the areas. So to this date, we have 5 complete agroecological farms established. The first one was in Cameroon in Obala, then in Burkina Faso in Yako, then in Kuchala in Mali, then in Pita in Guinea, and since last year in Ethiopia in Jima. And we are starting to establish networks of sister farms in Burkina Faso and Guinea, and hopefully next year in Ethiopia and Mali. So just here a map to see where we are active according to the Köppen classification of climate. So now we'll give a really precise example of what is an agroecosystemic model to show what are these farms that we establish. So we'll take the case of Guinea, where we have a first mother farm of 5 hectares. So in Guinea we are now establishing 3 others mother farm in the other climatic regions of Guinea, but today we will focus on this first farm that was established in Pita, so it's in middle Guinea. So here you see the plan of the farm with the different zones. So in this farm you have four main zones. You have a tuber and vegetable zone. So zone 1 that is separated in the subzone tuber and the subzone vegetable. So we will talk about it in details later. Then you have a cropland zone for mostly cereals and legumes, which is bigger on the right. Then you have a pasture zone to feed the animals on the left. And you have an agroforestry zone for mostly food production. You have a building compound where you have a house for watering and an access to water, and the whole agroecosystem, so the whole farm, is surrounded by a live productive hedge. So just to introduce the farm, now we will go more in details in the different practices that we use and in the different zones. So first of all, about the water management in this farm of Guinea, we have a borehole with solar pump because it's an area with a really dry season. We use drought-resistant varieties as much as we can, and we use water retention technique, so that we saw in this lecture at plot level. So stone barriers, hedges, grass hedges, so this grass belting around the plots. So yeah, here you see an example on the right of the hedge around the farm, and on the left an illustration of how it could be. So you have the live hedge around the farm, and then between the different plots you have grass belting. So a few picture of example of this this belting of plots to keep the water in them. So here it's in Cameroon, it's a belting with ananas. Here it's in Burkina Faso, it's a belting with Bracharia grass. Okay, uh, we also use water retention at crop level. So these are all techniques that we saw in this lecture. So the eye holes, the half moon, and the ridges. So here the half moon. Okay, in the soil management, we try to have a permanent cover. So we try to never leave the soil bare, especially in the vegetable zone where it's possible because we are active the whole year. In the cropland zone, we have a dry season where we don't do anything, so we try to leave some vegetation, even if we don't plant anything at that moment. So we have a crop rotation that try to fill all the gaps so that we never have nothing on the ground, and we do minimal soil disturbance, so we try to seed directly when it's possible. To fertilize, we use mostly animal manure of ruminants and poultry. We also compost the agricultural byproducts together with this manure, and we plant green manure either as cover crop between the crops, the food crops, or using the hedges. For pest and disease management, we rely mostly on a high biodiversity. So as we saw in this lecture, this means we have discontinuity of resources. We have an income diversification, and we have the attraction of beneficiaries of predators that can kill the pest and the disease that we want to fight. We plant crops to attract these beneficiaries, and we give refuges to these beneficiaries, so it can be stone barriers and things like this. We use crop association, we use crop rotation, we use biopesticide, so the different ones that we saw in this lecture, and we use biofumigation. Okay, so now that we saw a bit the basic principle that we integrate in these agroecological farms, we will look at the different zones more precisely. So first of all, we would look at the zone 1 and the subzone 1.1, which is the vegetable zone. So in this zone, we will produce intensively vegetable on a small area. So we have 4 plots of 1,000 quadrat meters, so we have 4,000 quadrat meters of vegetable. We will focus most of our workload, most of our water, and most of our nutrient here, because we can get a high production with vegetable. Firstly, in terms of production of food commodities. Secondly, in terms of income generation. We will plant all type of vegetable to have a diversity, and we will associate this vegetable and cultivate them in a rotation. And we separate the different plots with ananas as a belting. So this is an example of the rotation we do in this vegetable zone. So each of the crops that are indicated is the year. So in the first year we have 3 seasons, so the number are the months. So we start with okra in the rainy season, then we plant maize, bean, and squash in the cold season, and then carrot, onion, beetroot in the warm season, and the next year we plant mustard and then pepper and so on. And in each plot we start with another crops. So as you can see, we try as best as possible to alternate the families to prevent diseases. Yes. So a few pictures to show this zone in the farm of Guinea. Here is the nursery for tomato. Here is the plantation of vegetable inside holes inside the beds of the vegetable zones or in the dry season. Here is the tomato that is growing. And here an association of onion and zucchini. Here the association of onion and carrot, which is well known. Okay, so now we will look at the second subzone, which is the semi-agroforestry. So it's the same size as the vegetable zone, but we will give less care, we'll give less water. So we will mostly cultivate this zone in the wet season. It's still a small zone because tubers, first of all, need a lot of input in terms of seed, quantity, and price, because you mostly plant tubers, so it is really costly. And also because it's really damaging for the soil, so we don't want a too big area of these crops. The idea in this semi-agroforestry, so we talked about it, is to associate the tubers with fast-growing perennials in order to have the fast-growing perennials protecting the soil and compensating partly the damages caused by the cultivation of tuber. And as in the vegetable zone, we separate the plots with ananas. So an example, a picture here you can see in Guinea the banana, and on the ground you have the groundnut. Here an agroforestry plot in Cameroon where you can see the banana, pigeon. So it is a really good soil cover, so you don't see, you think it's a bit jungle, but you have the banana, papaya and pigeon pea as perennials, and you have the yam and the pumpkin creeping on the ground. So here the same plot on the left of semi-agroforestry compared to a plot of just an annual crop on the right. Okay, so in this zone we have the perennials staying the whole time, so banana, plantain, papaya and pigeon pea. And then we alternate different annuals. So in this case we have groundnut, then potato. Next year we have sweet potatoes. Then we have a green manure to recover, Stylosanthes. And then we have a demand crop yam with pumpkin in the last year. Okay, so now we will look at the next zone, which is the zone 2, the cropland zone. So in this cropland zone we have a way bigger area, so we will give less workload and less water and less nutrient in this area because it's too big to be as intensive as in the vegetable zone. So we have 6 plots of 3,000 quadrat meters, and we will plant crops that only in the rainy season that don't need much water, so do not need irrigation. We will plant crops that do not need too much fertilization and pest repellent treatments, and mostly crops that don't need too much work to grow. So mostly it will be cereals and legumes. So we will plant in this case maize, fonio, groundnut, cowpea, bean and hibiscus. As for the vegetable zone, we will cultivate these crops in association and in rotation, and we will separate the plots with bracharia grasses. So a few pictures of these plots, the preparation of these plots in Guinea. The association of fonio with groundnut, which was quite successful in Guinea. The harvest of groundnut. And here's the rotation that we plan in the zones. In the first year we have rice with Stylosanthes. In the next year we have sorghum with ground bean. Then we have radish as a biofumigation. Then the next year we have sesame in order to break to have 1 year no cereal and no legume. The next year we have 2 times maize together with the desmodium, so the push-pull system that we saw in this lecture to protect cereals. And then we have cowpea in the 5th year, and in the 6th year we do vegetables. So vegetables that can be direct seeded and that do not need too much work, like chili and okra. So a few pictures of this zone. Here you have separation of 2 plots of this zone. On the right you have maize, and the left you have sweet potato in this case, separated by groundnut. Here the association of maize with desmodium in the push-pull system. And here a plot of sorghum on the right, separated from the other plots by a bracharia hedge. Okay, so in the system we also have a building compound, so this is necessary to construct the infrastructure that we need on the farm. So this is basically a borehole with a pump and a water tank, a house for the warden, a toilet, and then a barn for the animals. So if you picture here the drilling of the borehole in Guinea, the construction of also the warden house and the water tank. Okay, so now we get to the next zone, which is zone 3, the pasture zone. So this zone is also 18,000 quadrat meter. In this zone we sow quality for the crops, so grasses, bracharia, penicetum, andropogon, panicum, and legumes, Stylosanthes, mucuna, cowpea, pigeon pea. And then we will do a rotating pasture. So as we saw in the lecture, we will always move the animals and let the vegetation grow back. We will separate the pasture plots with pigeon pea hedges, and we build a barn for the poultry and for the ruminants. We produce organically, so we don't give preventive antibiotics, and we will use the animals for the different use that they can be used. So manure production, as a bank, if we need to buy something, We use them for pest and weed control and to produce meat and eggs and milk, and of course to valorize bioproducts. And finally, we have the agroforestry zone of 3,000 quadrat meter to produce fruit. In this part, we will associate fruit trees with fodder trees, wood trees, and with annuals. And we can also use this zone for pasture once the crops are well installed. Finally, the whole farm is surrounded by a live productive hedge of 1,000 quadrat meter, which protects the farm from wind, pest, and disease, which maintain humidity in the agroecosystem, limits erosion, limits animal divagation, produce fodder, and produce some useful products for medicinal use or for phytosanitary use like acacia, moringa, or neem trees. So that was it for the presentation of an example, a precise example of an agroecological farm. So now we will just look quickly at the different farms that we have so far. So first of all, we have the farm of Yako in Burkina Faso. It's a farm of 1 hectare that we started in 2019. It is a farm in a really dry climate, so it's in the dry semi-arid climate of Köppen. So we have a rainy season of only 3.5 months and only 670 millimeter rainfall, so it's really dry. So it's for cropland you really need to be careful to be able to produce in the short time, and for vegetable you need an access to water to produce anything except out of these 3 months. So a few pictures of this farm: the vegetable nursery with the water tank, the vegetable zone with eggplants and onions surrounded by pigeon pea and papaya as belting. Here you see the belting again between the different vegetable plots. Here, so onions and eggplants. Here a view from the water tank, where you can see in the dry season the green vegetable zone and the hedge which is starting to grow. Okay, then we have a similar farm in Mali in Kuchala, but a 4 hectare that we started in 2020. So here it's a bit less dry. It's the transition to the tropical savanna climate, and we have a rainy season of 4.5 months and 890 millimeter rainfall. So it's a bit more humid, but it's still similar constraints to the farm in Burkina Faso. So if you picture here the association of maize and bean, the cattle in the barn, the production of chicken on this farm, the inclusion of bees in the agroforestry zone, and the harvest of vegetable of this farm with the chef of the farm here, Albert. Okay, then we have the farm in Pita. So we already we started. It's 5 hectares, and we started it in 2021. So we already saw a lot of picture of it. But it's a bit more humid as the two other one. We have a rainy season of 6 months and 1,500 millimeter rainfall. And the most important difference that it is at 1,000 meter of altitude, so it's a lot less hot. So if you picture, this was the site of the farm before establishing it. The planting of sweet potato on this farm, the association of fonio on groundnut that we saw just before, the harvesting of this fonio on groundnut. And yes, as I mentioned before, in Guinea we have a nation countrywide program. So we have started in 2023 to establish a farm, a mother farm, in each of the 4 geographic and climatic region of Guinea. So Guinea is a small country, but they have really different climate. So we have the coastal region where we are establishing currently a mother farm. We have the Middle Guinea, which is the mountain region, where we have the first farm in Pita, and we are also establishing a farm in Haute Guinea, also in High Guinea, which is the savanna climate, a bit like in Mali, similar to the farm in Kuchala. And we have the forest region where it's raining the whole year, so where we will, starting next year, establish a forest farm for the country. Okay, then we have the farm in Cameroon in Bilon. So it was started in 2019. It's a farm of 1.5 hectares. This is really in a lot more humid climate. We have almost 9 months of rainy season and 1,700 millimeter of rainfall, so we don't have much constraints with water on this farm. A plot of groundnut on this farm, the ruminants in the barn. And finally, we have the farm in Jimma in Ethiopia, which is a coffee, livestock, fish, vegetable integrated farm. So we have on this farm 5 hectares of coffee in an agroforestry system and 5 hectares of an integrated farm, including vegetable, cropland, and animals like the other mother farms. So it is established at Eladale Research Farm together with Jimma University, and we started in 2022. So in Jimma we have a subtropical highland climate, so something really different than in the other farms that we have. We are at 1,700 meter of altitude with a rainy season of 6 to 7 months and 1,600 millimeter of rainfall. So basically we have really a temperature a lot less hot than in the West African farms. So a few pictures of this farm here, the association of the Three Sisters maize, bean and squash at Jima Farm, the plantation of tomato in the in the vegetable zone, the association of onions, beetroot and carrot also in the vegetable zone. So thank you for your attention. So this was it. Today I showed a bit what we do at Antenna. If you are in one of these countries, I invite you to visit one of our farms, and I really thank you for having followed this lecture to the end. Thanks a lot.